I'll see it come on.
Do you get
Yep,
anything
it's
now?
on.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. Let me check on Facebook if it's there, and if anyone can see us or hear us, please let us know in the comments. Just chatting. Okay, I see. Facebook, we are live. On YouTube. All right. So, guys, this is our weekly live with me, Mike Sigala from truththeory.com, and Ben Joseph Stewart. And if you can hear us, please let us know in the comments. If you could let us know where are you watching from, and if the sound quality is good and everything, and we're gonna start very shortly. Loud and clear. Hey, how's it going?
All right.
Okay. Okay, cool. So yeah, we have a couple of people joining, and we hope to do these lives every week now. And first thing, if you can hear me on Facebook, if you could share this live with your friends, that's going to help a lot, so we get more people joining. And if you could let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And I'm here with Ben Joseph Stewart, benjosephstewart.com. Ben is a filmmaker, artist, musician, life coach, thinker, futurist. For those of you who don't know him, he created documentary films such as Kymatica, Esoteric Agenda. His newest film is called DMT Quest, and you can watch it on YouTube for free. It focuses on DMT. They just released that a couple of weeks ago. And today we're gonna talk about art, but maybe slightly different look on what art is. So the title is What an Art Revolution Might Look Like in Today's World. And, if you look at the definition of art basically is the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination. So technically everything is an art in a way, because anything we do is linked to our imagination and creativity. And Ben recently published a video on his YouTube channel. It's a part of his series called Waking Infinity News, and he was focusing on this topic. So he actually shared 3 different thoughts, and the first one is: where the other sees the constraints of limitation, the artist sees the anatomy of infinity. So Ben, can you elaborate on this thought? This is like your own idea, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's built from certain traditions, off of things that I've learned from Buddhism, Taoism, as well as other people who look at art as being an integral solution to things that are happening in the world. And so this one specifically is just kind of pointing out some of the ways that we have powers, but we don't see it that way. And a lot of the times we think powers should just be obvious to us. But these questions that I ask, or these aspects or roles that we can step into, really help us develop what does it mean to see the world differently and what power is in that. So in that one specifically, it's when you look at people in the world, I'm getting a lot of emails from my news show of people who are saying that it looks like the world itself is just what it is, and I'm 1 out of 7 billion people. I feel insignificant. I feel that society even tells me I'm insignificant, and if I'm not making a high enough salary, or if I'm in the right part of town, all these other things. And for the most part, I hear a lot of people saying, well, how am I supposed to be who I'm supposed to be with a world like this, living in a world like this? And to me, I really feel that this is cutting ourselves off from the fact that we have any agency in life, any that our choices mean absolutely nothing. That's what it kind of seems the attitude is. So whereas some see the limitations of the world and that's all I can be, I feel that that is like an artist is like, okay, I can work with that as a canvas. I can work with that as a starter point, and I'm still going to do what I find to be, expressing the infinite creativity inside me, no matter what the outside world looks like. So it's a perception shift that puts the, really the knowing that we have a say and we have power in the world. It puts that back on us rather than saying, well, I hope that the world gives me an opportunity to do X, Y, and Z to feel fulfilled.
Yeah, and I think especially in the current era where, you have internet, free education, anyone can become anybody, right? Because all the knowledge is literally at our fingertips. So, someone like me, for example, I just started learning things online, how to create websites, use social media, and a couple of years later, we're reaching millions of people with our messages. So I think that's an example of how, what abilities do we have? Like we see today, people, teenagers that can literally change the world. And I think it's something that wasn't really possible maybe 100 years ago. But currently, almost, most people have a lot of abilities. And I think it's really important to start shifting and realizing, shifting that perception and realizing what we are really capable of doing, And it's important, as you say, to, not think about challenges as some kind of problems, but more as a part of equation. It's like
Opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, for example, I'm 38 and I went through a lot of challenges in my life. And if I look at them from this perspective now, there are some tough times, but I always survived. And I could grow because of these challenges. Now I have more experience. I know how to solve some of these similar problems in the future. Maybe I know maybe what mistakes not to make. And really, how else can you grow if it's like you want to build muscles, you need resistance, right? You need some uncomfort. People kind of seek comfort these days. Everyone wants comfort, but comfort is not really linked to growth in a way.
Or happiness. The thing, I was even thinking about this because so I was driving my daughter home from school literally like 30 minutes ago, and I was thinking, she's having trouble adjusting to just going to school and being away from her parents. She's only 5. And what I kind of noticed was afterwards, we roll the windows down. It's warm already here in Tennessee, and we're just enjoying that quiet time, listening to music, just driving home, putting the hands out the windows. And like, that's something that if that were to be the only thing you ever do is drive around with your hands out the windows, it wouldn't be that brilliant anymore. So it feels relaxing only in reference to having gone through something that challenged you. And I think that as long as challenge is looked at as an opportunity for growth, rather than something that you're like stricken with, or something that's like punishing you, then that's when you just orient yourself. Like, you know, if I wanted to talk in woo-woo terms, really, like you just match the vibration of what's happening, and you stay focused, and then, you know, have your attention on it, but you allow it to penetrate you. You're not, it's almost like in mixed martial arts, they say when you get a knee to the ribs, you breathe out. And like also when you're hitting something, it's called the key up in karate, like you make that loud sound.
Okay, I guess Ben's internet connection. Are you back? Yeah, cool. Okay.
Yeah,
That was
I'm
just
not
for a
sure.
second. All right.
A lot more about perception. You know, the quality of your life is a lot more about how you perceive life than it is what you're given. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, you know, another interesting, important thing I would say is, instead of, you know, looking at any kind of challenge that happens to us, it's really all about how you react to it, how you interpret the issues, the problems that happen in your life. Because, you know, I can go through the same challenge as one person and you know, someone else, and someone else gonna struggle and complain and, you know, get drained and miserable, and other person, for example, will just treat it as another challenge, you know, and maybe focus on what can I learn from this situation, you know, how can it benefit me. So you literally, you know, you have two people who can face the same challenge or difficulty, but one person will get negatively affected and suffer, and the other person, you know, might not get affected at all, and even like, you know, gain something positive from the same thing. So it's, I would say it's so important, you know, how we react to what happens to us, because it's not really about what happens to us. It's more about how we respond to what happens to us. You know, it's all about your internal perception of, you know, anything that's happening around you. Like, for example, in my case, when I was in trouble financially, for example, you know, like company was going down, things like that, I would just focus on solutions instead of, like, you know, trying to analyze the problem, complain about it. I would try to look for solutions as much as possible, and you know, you keep trying different solutions, and at some point you finally figure things out. So another interesting thing here is that, you know, a lot of people like to blame, you know, put the blame on something. So it's either COVID killed my business, or economy is going down, or maybe whatever. Like, you know, a lot of people have this victim mentality where they just want to blame whatever situation happens. They will try to, you know, complain about or blame it. But I've seen a lot of situations where someone would find very creative ways to solve problems, and you know, they would actually thrive in these uncertain situations. Like, let me give you an example. One guy, you know, he had his restaurant shut down due to lockdowns and COVID, and he decided to turn his restaurant into some kind of tuna factory, whatever, and start selling tunas, you know. And it's just a silly, simple example, but where other people just, you know, complain, sit at home and wait for disaster to happen, he just thought, what can he do with what he already has, and continue, and turn it the other way around.
Yeah. Something you just said there made me think. So because I've noticed there's two types of people that I notice when I'm coaching people. I specifically look for these things. Are they the victim? And does that make them less creative? And or are they, let's say, an optimistic warrior? And the reason I'll say it that way is because there are a lot of people that I think, so let me just start by saying the artist is good at creating because they're good at listening. And there are some people who they don't feel like they're a victim. And they'll take up like a noble cause, like, well, I'm going to speak out against, or I'm going to spend the rest of my life and my energy bringing these people to justice, or, something that is warlike. And that also, you don't have to be the victim, like always grumpy and upset at the world, to also not be really stepping into your full potential as an artist and the way the artist sees the world. Because I know a lot of people who, like, they will fight to the death for something that they didn't stop and ponder enough to realize they didn't have to die for that cause, if you know what I mean. That's just a way of saying it. But some people, they will throw any and all caution to the wind so they can do the right thing. But it's not the most efficient way to do the right thing. And that's kind of where I feel a lot of people get the most stuck, is they know their heart's in the right place, and they just imagine that fate or divinity will carry them through unscathed. And they don't realize that it also calls upon us, the artist calls upon us to be accurate, to be scientific in many ways. A lot of us think that science and art and science and religion and science and philosophy are very separate things, and they're not. They're all aspects of consciousness, and all of them can lead to better art. And so that's why you see people like Alex Gray, who there's a religious, philosophical, and even a scientific tone to his art. And I kind of feel like these are the points that we need to be aware. Are we being defeatist, like the world is too big and I'm just going to check out? Or are we all, another thing that could be stunting our growth is, are we being this warrior and a champion for a cause that's less than fully intelligent, right? And we're not calling it dumb, and I'm really not trying to trigger anyone by this, but like sometimes we champion causes that haven't been fully thought through. So that's another thing to look out for. And all of these are opportunities not to judge ourselves, not to blame ourselves, but opportunities to be like, whoa, I could be that much more powerful if I just learn how to own the weaknesses that I haven't put any attention on yet.
Would you say that what you just described, Nikola Tesla could be an example of that? Someone who had an idealistic mind and utilitarian approach. So basically, he thought, he's a genius. He wants to change the world, and he doesn't care about financial gains and things like that. But actually, because of not being so practical in this sense, but being idealistic, he ended up, they used him, JP Morgan, people like him, Edison tried to kick him out. And so basically all these sharks around him that tried to take advantage of his genius, they were using him. And in the end, he ended up lonely, broke, etc. So in a way, not being so practical, not having like a good balance, being too idealistic.
Yeah, I think Nikola Tesla would definitely fall into that category, just from what I've read. I've read an autobiography on him and have done a lot of just auxiliary reading about him. I wouldn't say that he was by the notes, because in this book that I read, it had a lot of his notes, and he was even at one point trying to appeal to JP Morgan, or he was sticking up for JP Morgan in one of his notes or something along those lines. And I definitely feel that we always have to be weary of the fact that we feel like we have people out there championing our causes, and sometimes we don't realize that the people that are most capable of screwing us over maybe don't even have our worst interest in mind. They just don't know how to have our best interest in mind. Like, we hear what we want to hear, even in relationships where two people are trying to love one another for the rest of their lives. We hear what we want to hear, and I'm sure there was this kind of like, from both sides trying to work together. And then there was maybe a moral or an ethical thing that was really the wall between the relationship. And then it went the way that it went. And I think this is like, now in this world today, to make sure we're not being that way, all you got to really ask is, I was just talking about this in that last Waking Infinity News episode, where we have to ask, do we really know what's happening right now in the world, 2020, 2021? Do we know that we know? Now, I've made it my job to study what's happening in the world and to come to probably the five most realistic things that's happening. Why is all of this happening? Is it exactly like it seems on the mainstream media, or is there more beneath the story? And so I believe there's like five good, very well high potential things that could explain what's going on in the world. But I know I'm fallible, and I know that if I were to just pretend like I'm just going to take number one most probable reason as to why all this is happening, and I'm going to live my life according to that. And we don't realize that an artist, and this would be the second thing, where the other sees an either or situation. Is it possible to have a yes and more? So like, I'll just say it. Jordan Peterson, somebody I love, was on the Aubrey Marcus podcast, somebody else that I love. And in that conversation, they were talking about the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, a lot of things that are happening right now. And Jordan Peterson said, but there's no conspiracy. I've been in these circles before. Somebody will get up on stage and say, I'm going to fix the climate, and everyone will clap. And then afterwards, basically, the whoever was giving the speech doesn't have time to write the agenda, to actually write it out. So that falls on their secretaries, or not their secretaries, but people who write for them. They'll write the proposal, and all of a sudden that becomes the thing. So basically, Jordan was saying there's no conspiracy. It's ignorance, and it's ineptitude, it's inefficiency that's running the show. Well, if he's 100% correct, then you have to engage with a world that's too dumb to survive itself, right? And that's how you'll start building the solution for the world. But if there is a hint of conspiracy, and let's say 4 or 5 other probabilities out there, and it's a multi-dynamic thing, an artist doesn't concern themselves with, you need to prove to me what's happening out there before I start preparing myself in my life. And actually, the best way to prepare for an external scenario that we don't know how to confront, like an MMA fighter getting into the ring, they think they know what the opponent's like, but they may have some surprises up their sleeves. So you have to be ready for anything. That's the artist, is saying like, yes, that could be true, but I bet you a bunch of different things are true. So the best way to prepare myself for that is almost the exact protocols of any spiritual tradition. So like, that's what's funny about this, is the artist really seems like the most modern representation of somebody on a shamanic or a spiritual path.
Yeah, I mean, I think uncertainty is part of the game. If you have, like, life wouldn't be fun if we wouldn't have things that are challenging us and that we didn't predict. Like, for example, the situation with COVID, like over a couple of weeks of time, the whole world flips upside down. And the thing is, a lot of people tend to think linearly all the time. Like, they make assumptions that, oh no, this is impossible, or this is going to look like this. And then we get hit with reality, which, someone said, nature, you don't get straight lines in nature. Or, was it Gaudi, or I'm not sure, Salvador Dali, I think Gaudi said you don't really get straight lines in nature, because that's the thing, uncertainty and lack of predictability is a common thing in life and in nature. So, the more you go through uncertainties and challenges, the more you learn how to deal with, diversity. And I think this is like extremely important ability and skill, especially if you look at how the world is changing currently, where it's going with, automation, all sorts of challenges like climate change, pandemics, all these different things. We're starting to notice how rapid everything is shifting and changing, and the only really way to survive is to embrace change, because if you think things are going fast and changing fast and you have a lot of uncertainties going on, it's probably going to get more and more of that in the near future. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the interesting thing about coming from the place of an artist, is really acknowledging that the world itself, it has a way of expressing itself to you, and the way we listen is going to be tantamount to the way that we come up with the solutions that we put forward in life. And so we can talk about any and all of the, let's say, things that are going out there. I feel that what's happening in the past 2 years has more to do with something called the Great Reset, has more to do with the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It has more to do with an 80 to 90 year cycle, called the saeculum, or the Great Winter, something that, throughout American history, you can see happens every 80, 90 years. There's a crisis period. So I feel that really the best way to understand what's happening is, for one, not to belittle ourselves and to take a look at how small and insignificant our choices might be, but take a look at what kind of influence can we paint on the canvas of the world that's right around us. So what about our community? What can we do using the online and the digital world? And that's why I'm a filmmaker. That's why I talk topics that seem to break people out of their rigidity, such as psychedelics, breathwork, moving your body, really finding ways to celebrate in groups and communities. These are mind expanding practices, and I think that for the most of us, we're not just suffering from the world; we're suffering from ourselves and our own oppression.
Yeah, and I just want to add something a little bit more esoteric. Like, I personally, believe that everything is a collective consciousness, basically having an experience. And in a way, what's happening is like this reality is just like a video game, like a playground for this consciousness. So, it wouldn't be fun if you would create the video game and you would know, you would remember that you created the video game, you would know how to play it, right? What's the point of playing, having an experience and seeing what you are capable of doing? What can you do with your creativity? What can you create? How can you live life if you would know how to live life, because you designed that life, you designed the reality. So that's why maybe we can have that free will and uncertainty, because that's fun. Challenges make you grow, make something to be a fun experience. And if that's true, then what we came here to do with some of these challenges, like what's happening currently in the world, it's also part of the plan. It's also, this is what you sign up for, and maybe it's for some bigger reasons, higher for growth, wherever. Learn from this situation. So
Yeah. What's interesting thing about that is in this economic world that everything seems to be driven by the economic world, we try to play it safe. There's always risk assessment. And we think that overly controlling with the mind what we're going to risk and what's at stake in the world, we've come to believe that we know better than the thing that's carrying us. And so a lot of the times, even if you look at flow states of consciousness, what athletes and musicians and artists, they all experience this after a bunch of training. They'll experience this flow state where a seemingly very complex task will become exceedingly easy, and time will warp, space will warp. It'll seem like something like Michael Jordan said, it felt like the ball was dribbling me and the game was playing me. The Grateful Dead said then the music played the band. Like there was something higher that was calling the shots. And I kind of feel that like we play it safe so much that we're missing that flow state of consciousness, because even in the Flow Genome Project, they said what brings it on, the most efficient way to bring on a flow state is to find what your skill level is and to go 4%, not even that much, but 4% beyond your comfort level. And that is like the optimal zone to start triggering a flow state of consciousness. But the stakes have to be somewhat high. So like when you're going rock climbing and it starts getting super easy, and then you take off the safety harness, it changes the entire experience of it, because the stakes are a lot higher. You could actually die this time a lot easier than you could when you had that harness on you. So when you increase the stakes just a little bit as well, that also instigates flow states of consciousness. And I think that's the aspect of life that we're missing, that makes things that would seem fun now feel like servitude. So what we used to call like a vocation, we call now a job. Things that we would have done for the very love of being out in nature, now we call it servitude. And I think that's when you strip away the flow state, that higher intelligence that's playing through us, and you just control it with the mind. That's what makes everything feel kind of like a prison, like we are stepping into a prison planet.
Okay, cool. So I guess we're gonna wrap things up. Anything else you wanted to add, Ben?
Man, just to inspire people to use their voice more, and I don't just mean this voice. I mean, like, express yourself, be who you are meant to be, and allow people to see that. Be humble as you can, but not humbled to the point where you're shrinking because you're afraid of what people might think about you. You're actually, showing up in life is a good way to say it. When you show up in life, then you didn't just come here and skate through life pointing out the flaws of everybody else or pretending like you know what other people and other situations are supposed to be like. Being unnecessarily, critical or judgmental or harsh towards other people really only shows your own inadequacy. And so moving forward in life, a lot of the times when you're not showing up as who you meant to be, you get grumpy and then you start projecting your inadequacy onto other people. And that happens a lot, that happens to potentially people even here listening to this. So the bottom line to that is use your voice, but know that your voice stems and literally your tongue goes down to your heart in a certain manner of speaking. You speak from your heart easily when you know who you are. And when you don't let all these, I wonder what people are thinking, I want to try and present myself as such and such. When you get rid of all those filters and you find that kind of flow state, you realize it's the most easy, effortless, efficient, and also the most powerful thing you can do, which is just show up and be who you're meant to be in the world. And that, to me, makes you an artist, regardless of how you let it show up.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned actually something really important. The more authentic you are, I noticed that in a way, the more you resonate with everything you attract. So, for example, I think it's to do with intentions. Like, let's say I remember when I had intentions, like I wanted to do something for the money, the results would always be something like I would attract some guy who was a dick or whatever, only interested in money as well. But the more I started aligning myself with what I really want to be doing from my passion, my heart, I started attracting same kind of people towards me who are also thinking in the same way. So it's, and we get all these programs, from outside that tell you what you should do, who you should become. Like, this is better than this, Maybe you have some kind of passion for art, but your parents will tell you to become a lawyer because that makes more money. And, I think it's important to listen to that inner voice because really, like, if you start working from your heart more and more, then it just becomes more organic. And even if you think about, if someone does something because they're extremely aligned and passionate about what they're doing, they will always be better than someone who does the same thing because of trend, because of money. Some people gonna jump and start doing something because this is cool now, or that's gonna make more money. And the guy who's actually doing it because he truly loves to do exactly that thing, he's gonna be always much better. And often when it's gonna get tough, he's gonna be the one who's gonna keep grinding because because he's doing it from true passion and true love. And another thing I wanted to add is actually, really trying to find something that you really enjoy doing, you're really good at, and then think about how to make living out of it, because it's so much more fulfilling to go through life and do something every day that you really enjoy doing, even if sometimes doesn't make as much money as well-paid corporate job that maybe gonna buy you all the cool toys, but you're gonna be miserable and broke from the inside and hate what you're doing every day. Oh, what do you think,
Yeah.
Ben?
Well, I've done that corporate thing for a short stint, and you're definitely right. I mean, it pays a lot more and it costs a lot more, if you know what I mean. It costs a lot more of yourself. Yeah, there's something interesting you said about trend setting, and I guess this is a good point to kind of like place what we're talking about more in the world we live in today. I've noticed that when there's a good idea that's pumped out there, there's that creativity that happens, and then the idea is pumped out there. It inspires a certain number of people to do the same. And when I mean it inspires them, it calls them to be the artist, to do something with that format, but purely for the love of doing it. And then it also compels others. It doesn't inspire them, but it compels them to do the same as a formula to make money. And so you can look at this with movies, you can look at this with the music industry, you can look at this with creating apps, new business models, different product lines and stuff like that. You look at it, there's the inspired idea, there's the originator, and not oftentimes that's not even the best made product, it's just the innovator. And then there's real artists who come in and say, like, I totally see what you did. And like when Korn and Deftone came on the scene. These are two bands, and well, some would say Nirvana. These people that like they created a genre, and really those ones, they didn't create that genre. There were many people underground that you never heard of that did. But there's the innovator, then there's like the breakthrough, and there's these few elite artists. And then I would go so far as to say like somewhere upwards of 90 to 95% of the rest of the people who fall in line are a spectrum of being inspired, wanting to do that for a living, but also seeing a formula and like, dang, that person made 6 figures in 3 months by doing this. I want to do the same. And you'll see a lot of people like that. So what's interesting about that is when you look at that on a graph, it almost looks, you know, kind of like the size of an eye and the size of, you know, the retina, and then the eye, like the black spot in the middle of the eye. There's a certain kind of gradient that you'll see is the real artists are an elite. And then there's accompanying artists, and then there's a lot of just formula followers. So I think we live in a world, unfortunately, where there's too many formula followers. And that's not because we can't be artists. That's because we live in a scarcity model, and it calls forth, we need to survive, so we need to maximize monetary income. So that's a roundabout way of saying that we need to know whether we're being inspired or compelled or driven every single action that we make and what it's leading us towards.
Yeah, and also, you know, important is to not always like listen to what people say, their criticism. I would say, you know, if someone tells you this can't be done or it won't happen, whatever, like, you know, don't take things too seriously, because people think from their point of view. So, you know, maybe this is reality for these kind of people. And very often, you know, we can create completely new things, new reality. Like, let me give you an example. Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he wanted to become a Hollywood star, all the managers, you know, all the people there were just ridiculing him straight away in his face, saying that it's impossible for him to become a successful actor because he's too big, because of his accent, because of his name, whatever, you know. And if he would actually listen to these people, like, you know, maybe he wouldn't become who he became. So really, with his characteristics and assets, he built completely new brand. Let's say, you know, this superhero, whatever guy, big massive guy playing these kind of roles that he was playing. And it's sometimes, you know, you might bring something completely new to the table, new and unique, and often radical new things are rejected initially because people are used to whatever it's currently norm. So anything different, anything new, it's always, you know, going to face some form of rejection. And if you truly believe in something, you know, you might bring it to life, and you might actually create something completely new, you know, that people are going to learn about, you know. So,
yeah, there's this book called Music, A Subversive History. And what I like about it is it talks about a pattern that plays itself out throughout the history of music, because the music industry starts, you know, for the most part, the industry of it starts with classical music. But when looking at Beethoven and Mozart and some of the classics, all the way up to Public Enemy and Eminem and things along those lines today, they seem to follow a very similar arc, which is society, for the most part, finds them to be shock rock. There's a large part that just loves the shock value of it. There's a large portion that says this is demonic, it's anti-establishment. It's the same kinds of terms we'll throw on these things. and then later on, if they stick it out, if they keep producing music, then all the old folks die, or the old paradigm dies, and eventually you'll have Public Enemy and people who are talking about very anti-establishment, cop killer. You listen to some of Eminem's stuff, I won't even repeat the kind of stuff he says. And like later in their life, they're called innovators. They're not called demonic and stuff like that. They're even brought into Hall of Fames, for being what they were, for influencing an entire culture that is now more in power than just up and comers. So it's an interesting pattern that we have. And I kind of feel that it's the same thing with innovating something new. How many people are saying, cell phones are the destruction of culture, that social media is the destruction of culture? They've been saying these things about brand new innovations for a long time. And that's not to say that there aren't real downsides to these things. It's just also to say that this is a pattern that keeps being seen throughout history, is that brand new innovations, the work of the artist, often initially is met with a lot of resistance. And then eventually it's accepted. And then eventually down the line, people start taking credit for it that were the original resistors of it. So it's just something to keep in mind as far as like drawing forth that inner artist.
Yeah, and another thing is, if you actually start looking at properly studying some of the people who brought some innovations and things like that, it's very often, quite a lot of time before things took off. A lot of people tend to think it's overnight success, but if you actually start studying properly, you're going to learn that this guy was just writing for 10 years earlier or whatever. Everything was failing, until he got into the right moment where he came up with the right idea in exactly the right time. And it's very common thing. So also at the same time, when you keep trying and you get people criticizing you, like maybe your family, that it won't work out, just you're wasting your time, and that can be so discouraging. And it's important to keep these things in mind as well. To if you truly believe in something, like this is what you want to be doing, then you have to keep trying until it's going to happen. And not listen to naysayers and everyone around you who tells you that it can't happen. Yeah.
Success is, primarily it's persistence. And if you're persistent with something, for the most part, you're probably inspired to do it, or you really feel like you have to. But either way, successful people, if you look at the number one thing, it's not their gifts or talents. Sometimes it's the people they know, or the lucky circumstances they may have had. But for the most part, across the board, it's being persistent. So it will happen if you keep at it, and you just have to know, is this really what I want to develop in my life? And I think that's probably one of the best ways to look at becoming an artist, is know what you're really looking to develop. Are you looking to develop it so you can impress other people, or are you looking to develop it because you want to discover who you are? And then it becomes, dare I say it, like a spiritual path, a path of self-discovery. And everything you do out in the world, it gets better and better, because you're discovering deeper and deeper areas of your own creativity. So I'll just end on that. I think that's what we're stepping into as a planet. It's asking us to be the artist.
Yeah. Okay. We're gonna finish for today. Thanks a lot, Ben, for joining me this week. And guys, check out Ben's work at benjosephstewart.com, Waking Infinity News on YouTube. Have a look. He released a couple of free documentaries that you can find on YouTube. DMT Quest is the most recent one. Kaimatica Esoteric Agenda. And if you can share this live still with your friends on Facebook, that would be amazing. And you see the link to Telegram there on Facebook. Please subscribe on Telegram, because we are sharing a lot of updates on Telegram. And basically, Facebook is hiding content quite a lot. So it's better to, see more content on Telegram and other platforms. And next week, roughly same time, we're gonna do another live. And thanks for joining us today, and thanks, Ben, for sharing your wisdom with us. Until next time.